The divorce she planned to win. Until my secret trap destroyed everything wasn't just another chapter in my life. It was a turning point that revealed the truth about everything I thought I knew. On the outside, my marriage to Barbara looked flawless. A spacious home in the suburbs, weekend barbecues with neighbors, and family photos that seemed to capture the picture-perfect American dream. But what people didn't see was the silence at our dinner table. The way Barbara's smile faded when no one was watching, and the cold calculation hidden behind her words. I'm David, the man she believed was blind to her every scheme. What I didn't know at first, but would soon discover, was that Barbara wasn't planning just a separation. She was orchestrating a carefully designed divorce, one she thought would strip me of everything. My savings, my career, even the very roof over my head. She believed she was playing a perfect game. But Barbara underestimated me. What she didn't realize was that I had already begun building my plan. This is not simply a story about betrayal. It's a story of patience, silence, and a trap that turned her ambition into her downfall. Before we begin, I would appreciate it. If you like this video, you can help me continue to spread the meaningful lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know so I can make a better video for you. Now, let's get started. On the surface, my life with Barbara looked like the kind of American dream most people envied. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside of Chicago, where manicured lawns lined the streets and neighbors waved at each other as they took their dogs out for evening walks. Our house was 2 stories tall, with white shutters, a trim garden out front, and a backyard large enough for barbecues and summer parties. To the outside world, we were the picture of stability. David and Barbara, the couple who had it all. I had worked hard to get there. Years of dedication to my career in finance had given us the kind of lifestyle I thought would secure our happiness. Barbara never had to worry about money, about bills, or about working late nights. She decorated the house with her touch of elegance, hosted parties where she played the perfect wife, and made sure our friends believed we were the ideal couple. At least, that's what I thought for a long time. But the cracks started showing in ways only I could see. Small at first, barely noticeable. The way she stopped asking me about my day. The way she'd look at her phone during dinner. Her lips curling into faint smiles when she thought I wasn't watching. At night, when I reached for her hand in bed, she pulled away as if even the weight of my touch was too much. These weren't the things friends and neighbors saw. To them, Barbara was charming, graceful, and attentive. To me, she was drifting into another world, one I wasn't welcome in. I tried to dismiss it at first. Marriages go through rough patches, I told myself. People change. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was just tired of the routine. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Barbara wasn't just pulling away. She was planning something. The realization came slowly, like a storm rolling in from the horizon. I remember one evening, I walked into her home office without knocking. She slammed her laptop shut faster than I'd ever seen her move. Just emails, she said, her voice too light, too rehearsed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her steady breathing beside me, and I knew she was hiding something. Weeks turned into months, and her distance became more obvious. She started going out more often, brunches with friends, yoga classes, networking events. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't ignore the inconsistencies. Sometimes she'd come home later than expected, smelling faintly of wine, her excuses as thin as paper. She thought I was blind. She thought I was too busy with my career to notice. But I noticed everything. The turning point came when I found a neatly folded document tucked into the bottom drawer of her desk. It wasn't hidden well enough. I don't think she imagined I'd ever go through her things. The document was a draft divorce petition. My name, David Parker, stared back at me in bold letters. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just an idea she was toying with. Barbara was planning a divorce. And not just any divorce. As I read through the lines, the details made my blood run cold. She had listed our assets meticulously, everything from the house to the joint accounts, even my retirement savings. She wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing to take everything. That night, I sat in my study long after she had gone to bed. The lamp cast a dim glow over the wooden desk, and the silence of the house felt heavier than ever. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, my hands trembling as I replayed the discovery over and over. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to shout at her for betrayal. But I didn't. Something inside me told me to stay quiet, to wait. Barbara thought she was the only one who could play the game, but she had underestimated me. Over the next few weeks, I began to watch her more closely. I kept my face calm, my tone neutral, as if nothing had changed. If she suspected that I knew, she didn't show it. She carried on with her charade, confident that her plan was unfolding perfectly. And all the while I was learning, watching, preparing. I noticed how often she called her lawyer. I noticed the sudden new credit card she opened in her name alone. I even noticed the way she buttered up our friends, carefully planting seeds in conversations that painted me as inattentive, selfish, maybe even unfaithful. She was building her narrative, the story she would tell once the papers were filed. She wanted the world to believe she was the victim, and maybe she could have pulled it off if I had been the man she thought I was. But Barbara had married a man who understood strategy, who understood patience, who had built his entire career anticipating moves before they happened. I wasn't going to hand her my life on a silver platter. Still, in those early days, I battled with myself. Part of me wanted to confront her, to ask why. We had been married for 12 years. We had shared dreams, vacations, and holidays with family. I thought of the time we stood under the fireworks in New York City on our 5th anniversary, holding hands and kissing as if we were still in love. Was all of it a lie? Or had something broken along the way that neither of us had repaired? But the answers didn't matter anymore. She had chosen betrayal. She had chosen greed over love, ambition over loyalty. And now I had to choose too. So I chose silence. Every morning, I kissed her cheek before heading to work, pretending everything was normal. Every evening, I asked about her day, pretending I believed her lies. I became the perfect actor in her script, giving her the illusion of control. But behind the mask, I was writing my script, one that would turn her carefully laid plan into ashes. Barbara wanted to win the divorce. She thought she had already won. But what she didn't know was that the trap had already begun to form, quietly and invisibly around her every move. And when the time came, she would never see it coming. Barbara had always been clever. I'll give her that. She had a sharp mind. And when she wanted something, she knew how to maneuver people into giving it to her. In the early years of our marriage, I admired that quality. She could negotiate with car dealers, talk her way into getting upgrades at hotels, and convince our friends to host gatherings on her terms. But the same qualities I once admired were now being turned against me. The more I watched her, the more obvious it became. Barbara wasn't just preparing to leave. She was preparing to win. She wanted to walk away with the house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, and even my reputation. She was building a strategy as carefully as a lawyer preparing for a trial. I began to notice little signs everywhere. She started meeting with new people, lawyers, financial advisors, even a real estate agent. At first, she disguised them as casual encounters. "Oh, I bumped into an old college friend for lunch," she'd say, or "I was just getting advice on investments." But she underestimated my ability to read between the lines. I'd worked in finance for over 20 years. I knew the difference between innocent questions and calculated moves. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. She was speaking in a hushed tone, the kind people use when they don't want to be caught. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough: assets, custody, division, strategy. My chest tightened, but I kept my face blank when she walked past me a few minutes later. Barbara thought she was orchestrating the perfect setup. She was wrong. She began planning her narrative with our circle of friends. At barbecues or dinners, she'd casually joke, "You know, David, he's married to his job more than he's married to me." Everyone would laugh, including me, but there was a sting behind her words. She was laying the groundwork, shaping perceptions. If the divorce came, she wanted to be the one everyone pitted, the victim of a neglectful husband. I could see how convincing she was. She'd tilt her head just slightly, smile with practiced sweetness, and her friends would nod in sympathy. Barbara had always been a skilled performer, and now she was putting on the show of her life. But what chilled me most wasn't her manipulation of friends. It was her manipulation of the law. I learned quickly that she was quietly moving money. At first, it was small amounts, withdrawals from our joint account that she disguised as household expenses. But I noticed irregularities. A few $100s here, a few thousand there. Over time, it added up. She opened new accounts under her name, siphoning away funds she thought I wouldn't notice. She also started talking about custody, even though we didn't have children. That detail baffled me at first, until I realized she was speaking about our dog, Charlie. He was a golden retriever we'd had for 6 years, loyal to a fault and a companion I loved dearly. Barbara mentioned Charlie in passing one day, saying, "If things ever went south, you know I'd keep him." Judges usually favor the woman in these cases. She said it lightly with a laugh, but there was no humor in her eyes. It wasn't a joke. She was testing me. The more I pieced together, the more I understood the scope of her plan. Barbara wanted to destroy me, not just divorce me. She wanted control over everything, even the smallest details, leaving me with nothing. But here's where she made her mistake. Barbara assumed that because I stayed quiet, I was clueless. She thought I was too wrapped up in my spreadsheets and late nights at the office to notice. She thought I was naive, maybe even weak. She didn't realize that my silence wasn't ignorance. It was calculation. Every move she made, every word she whispered, I stored away like evidence. I began documenting everything. Every suspicious withdrawal, every odd meeting, every slip of the tongue. I started keeping copies of bank statements, saving screenshots of emails, and even recording conversations when I could. Barbara might have been cunning, but she wasn't cautious enough. And still, she carried on, blissfully unaware. One night, she came home late, wearing a dress I hadn't seen before. Her hair was styled, her perfume lingered in the air, and she had that faint smirk, the kind you wear when you think you've gotten away with something. She said she had been at a networking event downtown. I simply nodded, kissed her on the cheek, and poured her a glass of wine. Inside, though, my resolve hardened. She was playing a dangerous game, and I was going to let her believe she was winning. Over the next few weeks, Barbara's confidence grew. She started leaving legal documents lying around carelessly, almost as if daring me to ask questions. I found drafts of financial affidavits, lists of assets she planned to claim, and even notes about conversations with her lawyer. She was preparing to make her move soon. Her arrogance was her downfall. I remember one particular morning when she slipped up. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran upstairs to grab her phone. I walked by, pretending not to care, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw the email subject line, "Divorce Settlement Strategy." My pulse quickened, but I didn't touch the computer. I didn't need to. I already had enough to know exactly what she was planning. Barbara wanted to paint me as inattentive, cold, maybe even unfaithful. She wanted to take the house, the accounts, and Charlie and walk away with sympathy on her side. She wanted to crush me completely, to leave me as nothing more than a footnote in her story of triumph. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that I had already begun weaving a story of my own, a story that would unravel her entire scheme thread by thread. Barbara thought she was writing the final chapter of our marriage, but really, she was just setting the stage for my trap. Silence became my greatest weapon. Barbara thought she was moving to the shadows, orchestrating her plan in secret. But the truth was, I saw more than she ever realized. It was almost amusing at times, watching her put on her performances, convinced that her brilliance went unnoticed. Every lie she told, every little smirk when she thought she won around, it all became part of the evidence I quietly filed away in my mind. I had learned long ago in business that emotions cloud judgment. Panic makes you sloppy. Anger makes you reckless. If you want to win, you have to stay calm. Keep your cards close and let the other person reveal their hand. That's exactly what I did with Barbara. Every morning, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed. I kissed her cheek before leaving for work, brewed her coffee just the way she liked it, and listened to her chatter about trivial things as though I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal in my chest. In the evenings, I asked her about her day, nodding at her carefully rehearsed answers while quietly dissecting every inconsistency. I became a ghost in my own home, present but not fully seen. And in that role, I was able to observe more clearly than ever. Barbara had patterns, and once I started paying attention, they became easy to track. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she claimed to have yoga after work, but she always came home with her hair styled differently, makeup freshly applied. On Saturdays, she began taking long drives to clear her head, which always coincided with charges on her credit card at upscale restaurants downtown. She wasn't just planning a divorce. She was living a double life in the meantime. Instead of confronting her, I documented everything, quietly, methodically, like an accountant balancing a ledger. I collected receipts from her shopping bags, copied bank statements when she left them lying around, and even installed a small camera in the study. Nothing invasive, just enough to capture her rifling through documents she thought were hers alone. The more I observed, the more a picture formed. Barbara wasn't just trying to leave. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to build a case so airtight that I would be crushed legally, financially, and socially. She was meeting with her lawyer frequently, and I suspected she had begun to leak details to mutual friends to ensure they'd side with her when the time came. One evening, over dinner with our neighbors, she made a pointed remark. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a husband who was really present, someone who wasn't always buried in work. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes flicked toward me, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. I simply sipped my wine, smiled back, and let the comment hang in the air. Inside, I noted it as yet another piece of her performance, another seed she was planting. The more she pushed her narrative, the calmer I became. It was almost like watching a play unfold, each act scripted by Barbara, each line rehearsed, while I sat silently in the audience, already knowing how the story would end. But silence doesn't mean passivity. While Barbara thought she was outmaneuvering me, I was quietly setting my foundation. I met with my attorney discreetly, explained the situation in careful detail, and began transferring assets into places she couldn't touch. I reorganized accounts, adjusted investments, and created legal protections she couldn't anticipate. Barbara believed she had access to everything because, for years, I had allowed her to. She handled the household spending, paid bills, and occasionally managed small investments. What she didn't realize was that I'd always kept a second layer of protection, accounts and trusts she didn't know existed, legal structures designed to shield assets not just from market volatility, but from opportunists. And now, that foresight will become the backbone of my counterstrike. Meanwhile, I continued my silent observations. One night, I returned home earlier than usual. Barbara wasn't expecting me. As I stepped into the living room, I heard her voice in the study, low and sharp. She was on the phone. I paused in the hallway, out of sight, and listened. He's too focused on work to notice anything. I'll have everything lined up by summer. The house will be mine, the account split in my favor. Trust me, the judge will see it my way. Her confidence was staggering. She didn't just believe she would win. She believed I was already defeated. I slipped upstairs quietly, making enough noise as I reached the bedroom, so she'd think I had just come home. When she ended her call and greeted me, her face was all smiles, as if nothing had happened. I smiled back, hiding the storm brewing inside me. Barbara's arrogance made her blind. She thought she was untouchable, that her lies were untraceable, that her manipulations were flawless. But every step she took left a trail, and I was following it closely. At night, when she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, planning. My trap wasn't going to be loud or obvious. It wasn't going to be a confrontation in the middle of the night or a dramatic argument in front of friends. No, my trap would be quiet, deliberate, and devastating. The kind of blow you never see coming until it's too late. In silence, I found clarity. I started imagining the courtroom, the look on Barbara's face when her carefully constructed lies collapsed. I imagined her lawyer flipping through papers, realizing too late that their case wasn't airtight after all. I pictured the sympathy draining from her friends' faces when the truth surfaced, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and defeated. Every time I thought of those moments, a calm satisfaction washed over me. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to rage. My silence was enough. My patience was enough. Barbara thought she was weaving a web to entangle me. But what she didn't realize was that I was already weaving one of my own, stronger and far more dangerous. And when the time came, she would discover that the man she thought was too quiet, too passive, too distracted by work, was a man who had been watching her every move. The trap was almost ready. There's a saying I once heard, revenge is best served cold. But I've learned that in marriage, revenge is best served quietly, invisibly, until the very moment it detonates. That's exactly how I built my plan against Barbara. For months, I let her believe she was winning. I let her smile at me with that smug confidence, let her gossip with friends, let her meet with her lawyer and financial advisors. Every time she looked at me with pity disguised as superiority, I simply nodded, played the dutiful husband, and kept my silence. She thought I was asleep at the wheel, unaware that she was about to pull the rug out from under me. But in truth, every quiet moment was another step toward her downfall. The first part of my trap was financial. Barbara had been siphoning money from our joint accounts into her own, thinking she was being clever. What she didn't know was that I had already spoken to my attorney months earlier. With his guidance, I restructured everything. I transferred certain assets into trusts under my name, closed accounts she thought she could access, and moved funds into secure investments she couldn't touch without my signature. On paper, it looked ordinary, routine financial planning. But in practice, it meant that when the divorce proceedings began, Barbara would be left grasping at air. I also began keeping meticulous records. Every bank withdrawal, every questionable purchase, every email. I store them carefully in a private folder, copies printed and locked away in a safe deposit box she didn't know existed. In a courtroom, evidence is everything, and I wasn't going to walk into battle empty-handed. The second part of my trap was social. Barbara had been poisoning the well with our friends, telling half-truths and planting stories about me being distant, inattentive, maybe even unfaithful. I could have confronted her, but that would have only fueled her narrative. Instead, I chose patience. Whenever we were out with friends, I was calm, warm, and attentive. I asked her about her day in front of them, held her hand when she spoke, and laughed at her jokes even when they were sharp. I wanted people to see a different version of me, the husband she couldn't quite discredit. Slowly, without realizing it, her campaign against me began to lose credibility. Her stories didn't match the man people saw in front of them. But the heart of my plan, the true snare, was legal. I had learned enough about divorce law in Illinois to understand how crucial timing and documentation were. Barbara thought she'd file first and blindside me, but I was already 3 steps ahead. With my lawyer's help, I drafted a counterpetition, one that outlined not only her attempt to hide assets, but also her questionable spending habits and suspicious behavior. We gathered receipts of her lavish dinners, unexplained withdrawals, and even travel expenses that hinted at more than just networking. Barbara thought she was building a case against me. What she didn't know was that she had been building a case against herself. I remember one night, sitting across from her at the dinner table. She was glowing, almost smug, swirling her wine glass as she talked about a charity gala she might attend. I watched her, calm as ever, and thought, if only you knew, if only you realized the ground beneath you is already cracking. The most delicate part of my trap was ensuring she never suspected a thing. That meant pretending to be careless with my documents, leaving old bank statements out where she could see them, making her believe she still had access to everything. I even feigned ignorance when she made snide remarks, acting as though I was too distracted to catch the sting in her words. All of it was part of the illusion. The day I knew my trap was ready came when I followed her, quietly, discreetly. Barbara thought she was untouchable, that she could move freely without consequence. One evening, she told me she had a late yoga session. Instead, I watched her walk into a downtown hotel lobby, her hand brushing the arm of a man I didn't recognize. I didn't confront her. I didn't take pictures or cause a scene. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't catching her in the act. It was understanding how far she was willing to go. That night confirmed what I already knew. Barbara wasn't just betraying me financially. She was betraying me emotionally, too. When I returned home that night, she was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I looked at her, the woman I once loved deeply, and felt nothing but resolve. She had made her choice. Now it was time for mine. Over the following weeks, I fine-tuned every detail. My lawyer and I worked quietly, ensuring that when the papers were finally filed, Barbara would walk into a courtroom expecting victory, but leave in ruins. I set up meetings with financial experts, created airtight documentation, and even prepared witness statements from people who had seen her lies unravel. Barbara, meanwhile, grew bolder. She left her lawyer's notes lying around the house, made sly comment about starting fresh, and even hinted to friends about an upcoming big change. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she had already won. And that's exactly what I wanted her to think. I remember the last Sunday before everything unfolded. We hosted a small dinner party at our house. Neighbors, colleagues, a few friends. Barbara was radiant, playing the charming hostess, her laughter filling the room. She dropped subtle digs at me, little comment about how I worked too much, how she often felt alone. People chuckled politely. Some shifted uncomfortably, but I simply smiled, poured her another glass of wine, and kissed her cheek in front of everyone. She looked at me with a flicker of confusion, just for a moment, as if she couldn't quite understand why I was being so attentive. That moment told me everything. She had no idea what was coming. That night, after everyone left and the house fell silent, I walked into my study, opened a locked drawer where I kept the final set of documents, and laid them out in front of me. The evidence, the financial records, the testimonies. It was all there. My trap was complete. Barbara believed she was a hunter, circling her prey, waiting for the perfect strike. But in reality, she had been walking straight into my snare all along. The stage was set. The courtroom would be the arena. And when the curtain rose, Barbara would realize that the divorce she planned to win had already become the battle she was destined to lose. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm that had been building for months. The courthouse in downtown Chicago loomed tall and imposing, its marble steps gleaming under the morning sun. As I walked up those steps, I felt the weight of every moment leading to this point. But not fear. No, fear had long since left me. What filled me now was calm anticipation. Barbara was already there when I arrived. She stood near the entrance with her lawyer, dressed in a sleek navy blue suit, her hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp and confident. She looked like a woman who believed she had already won, as if today was nothing more than a formality. When her eyes met mine, she gave a small, dismissive smile. To her, I was a man who was about to lose everything. I didn't return her smile. Instead, I walked past her, head held high, my lawyer by my side. The trap was ready, and soon enough, she'd understand just how wrong she was. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The wooden benches creaked as people settled in, attorneys shuffled papers, and the judge took his seat. The gavel struck, and suddenly it was real. This wasn't a rehearsal. This was the battlefield. Barbara's attorney opened with confidence, laying out her story with smooth precision. He painted her as a neglected wife, abandoned emotionally by a husband too obsessed with his career to notice her needs. He spoke of long nights alone, of financial dependence, of a woman who had given her best years to a man who had given her nothing in return. Barbara sat at the table beside him, nodding along, occasionally dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She played the victim beautifully, her performance flawless. For a moment, I looked around the courtroom, watching the subtle shifts in body language. A few sympathetic glances were cast her way. She had practiced this role, and she was convincing. But performances crumble when confronted with the truth. When it was our turn, my lawyer stood calm and deliberate. He began not with passion, but with facts. Cold, undeniable facts. He pulled out bank statements, showing Barbara's secret withdrawals, highlighting dates and amounts. He produced documents of her hidden accounts, open in her name only. He revealed credit card records of dinners and hotel stays, charges that could not be explained by yoga or networking events. The courtroom grew quieter with each piece of evidence. Barbara shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge allowed the evidence to be entered. Piece by piece, the image she had built began to crack. Then came the witnesses. Mutual friends who had grown suspicious of her stories testified about her sly comments, her attempt to turn them against me. Even one of her so-called brunch companions admitted under oath that Barbara had openly spoken of winning big once the divorce went through. I sat silently through it all, hands folded, face calm. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to smirk. The evidence spoke louder than any words I could have said. Barbara's lawyer scrambled, tried to regain control, but every rebuttal crumbled under the weight of documentation. Each objection was met with another fact, another receipt, another undeniable truth. It was like watching a structure collapse, brick by brick, until only rubble remained. At one point, the judge looked directly at Barbara and asked, "Mrs. Parker, can you explain why these accounts were open without your husband's knowledge?" Barbara stammered, her voice cracking. She tried to muster her usual confidence, but the words came out jumbled, desperate. For the first time, her mask slipped, and the courtroom saw not a victim but a manipulator exposed. Her attorney leaned toward her, whispering frantically, but the damage was done. The final blow came when my lawyer presented the timeline, emails, receipts, and records that aligned perfectly with Barbara's supposed lonely nights. The picture was clear. While she claimed abandonment, she had been living her own secret life, dining out, staying in hotels, moving money, preparing her grand scheme. The silence in the room was deafening. When it was over, the judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He reviewed the evidence carefully, then spoke with measured words. "It appears, Mrs. Parker, that this petition is not only unfounded but rooted in deceit. The court cannot ignore the manipulation and the concealment of assets. The petition is denied. Furthermore, Mr. Parker's counterpetition will be considered valid." Barbara's face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table, her eyes darting from the judge to her lawyer to me. For once, she had no performance left, no rehearsed lines to deliver. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply sat there, calm, the silence of victory surrounding me. As the gavel struck, the reality settled over the room. Barbara had walked into this courtroom expecting triumph. She walked out shattered. Outside, as we exited the courthouse, the August sun blazed overhead. Barbara stood a few feet away, speaking heatedly with her lawyer, her voice rising in frustration. She glanced at me once, her eyes burning with rage, but also with something else. Fear. She knew it was over. I walked past her without a word. The divorce she had planned so meticulously, the victory she believed was hers, had collapsed entirely. And it wasn't because I shouted or fought or exposed her recklessly. It was because I had been patient. I had been silent. I had set a trap so perfect that by the time she realized it, it was already too late. The courtroom battle was finished, but the aftermath, the real consequences, were only just beginning. The courtroom battle ended with the sound of the gavel, but the echo of that moment lingered long after. Barbara had entered the courthouse, certain she was about to win everything. She left pale, hollow, and defeated, her carefully rehearsed image shattered under the weight of truth. For weeks afterward, the fallout consumed her life. The friends she thought she had won over began to distance themselves. Whispers spread in our social circle about her hidden accounts, her lies. The evidence lay bare for everyone to see. People who once admired her charm now looked at her with suspicion. Invitations stopped coming. The phone that once buzzed with brunch plans and charity gala invites grew eerily silent. Barbara wasn't prepared for the loneliness that came with losing her credibility. She had built her identity around being admired, envied, and respected. Now, she was the subject of gossip, the cautionary tale shared over glasses of wine. Financially, the blow was even harder. The court not only denied her petition, but also upheld my counterclaim. Assets she thought she could seize were locked away beyond her reach. Accounts she had hidden were exposed and factored against her. In the end, she walked away with far less than she had imagined, while I retained control over everything I had worked for. The house, The investments, even Charlie, the golden retriever she tried to claim as her own, remain with me. I'll never forget the day she came to the house to collect her things. Barbara moved through the rooms like a ghost, her steps hesitant, her expression blank. This was a home she had once decorated with pride, the place where she believed she would reign after stripping me of everything. Now, it was just a reminder of what she had lost. She lingered in the living room, her hand brushing over the arm of the couch, her eyes darting to the photos still hanging on the wall. Us on our wedding day. Us on vacation in California. Smiles that once felt real, now frozen reminders of a marriage turned battlefield. She didn't say much, only muttered under her breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. I stood in the doorway, watching her. I felt no anger, no satisfaction in that moment, only clarity. Barbara had chosen greed over loyalty, betrayal over trust. She had set out to destroy me, and instead, she had destroyed herself. After she left, silence filled the house. For the first time in years, it wasn't a heavy silence of suspicion and lies. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that comes with freedom. In the months that followed, I rebuilt, not my finances, because those were intact, but my sense of self. I started spending weekends on things I loved. Fishing trips with friends, long drives along Lake Michigan, evenings cooking meals in my kitchen with Charlie curled at my feet. There was no one pretending, no one scheming. Just me, living without the constant weight of deception pressing on my chest. Barbara, on the other hand, spiraled. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. Her lawyer dropped her after unpaid bills. She tried to rekindle friendships, but doors closed on her. She attempted to move to another part of the city, chasing a fresh start. But reputations follow faster than moving trucks. People knew her story, and it wasn't the one she wanted them to believe. Occasionally, I'd get a late-night text from her, short, bitter words like, "You ruined me," or "This isn't fair." I never responded. What was there to say? She had written her own, ending the moment she chose betrayal. My silence was the final answer she would ever get from me. One evening, about 6 months after the divorce, I ran into her downtown. She looked thinner, her hair unkempt, her clothes lacking the polished elegance she once carried like armor. For a moment, she froze when she saw me. Her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not arrogance, but regret. "David," she said softly, almost pleading. I nodded politely, but I didn't stop. I walked past her without a word, leaving her standing there on the sidewalk, swallowed by the city lights. That was the last time I ever saw her. Looking back now, I realized the true victory wasn't winning the house or the accounts or even Charlie. The real victory was freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the manipulation, from the life I had been living in quiet misery. Barbara thought she was stripping me of everything, but in truth, she freed me from her. It's ironic. She planned the divorce to be her greatest triumph, but it became her greatest failure. She underestimated me, underestimated the power of patience and silence. And in doing so, she sealed her fate. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the back porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the stars over Chicago's skyline. Charlie lies at my feet, the night quiet except for the distant hum of the city. I think about everything that happened, and I feel no bitterness. Only a quiet, steady peace. Barbara's name still comes up occasionally in conversations with old friends. They speak of her with pity now, not admiration. She became the woman who lost everything. Not because of me, but because of herself. As for me, I live simply. I don't chase revenge, don't seek validation. I don't need to. The story is already written, the lesson already clear. The divorce Barbara planned to win, the one she thought would leave me broken, became the trap that destroyed her instead. And I didn't need to shout, didn't need to fight, didn't need to rage. All I needed was silence. And in that silence, I found my freedom. And that, my friends, is how the divorced Barbara thought she would win became the very trap that destroyed everything she had planned. What she believed would be her greatest triumph turned into her ultimate downfall. For me, the true victory wasn't just in keeping the house, the accounts, or even Charlie. It was in reclaiming my freedom, my peace, and my life. But here's the bigger question. What you take away from this story? Was it the reminder that betrayal always comes with a price? That patience and silence stronger than shouting and fighting? Or that sometimes the best revenge is letting someone walk straight into the consequences of their actions? I want to hear from you. Comment down below with one lesson you've learned from this story, and more importantly, tell me how you plan to apply in your own life. Maybe it's about relationships, maybe about trust, or maybe about resilience when life doesn't go the way you expected. Your thoughts matter, and your perspective might inspire someone else who's going through their silent battle right now. And if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget. If you liked this video, please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.